There are some major primary contests unfolding today. We talked to Ryan Grimm about a few on the progressive side, but there is one in Kansas on the Republican side that is also very interesting. So essentially, you recall Kris Kobach, former Kansas Secretary of State, very controversial figure, very sort of immigration restrictionist, really aggressive on voter ID, and ran for governor back in 2018. Kansas, of course, being a very red state, got the backing of President Trump, was able to eke out the win in the primary, goes on to lose to the Democrat in the general election. So now the question is Kobach going to win this Senate primary again and potentially put the Kansas Senate seat in jeopardy of a Democratic win, which is something that really shouldn't be a possibility?
Yeah, so there's a big issue here, right? Because Kobach is running against an opponent that's backed by Mitch McConnell. Right. And so the tension you have here is between sort of this economic populism, Donald Trump style politics versus the politics of the Chamber of Commerce and Mitch McConnell. And both of these things are now playing out. McConnell has come in hard against Kobach. He and his affiliated campaigns have spent millions against him.
Yeah.
But I think, Kobach has a shot, and I think that that's telling you something, right? That's telling you something that Mitch McConnell doesn't have as much authority as he wants in this race. But I think a lot of voters see this as what it is as well, which is, look, McConnell collects these type of senators. He wants senators who will not challenge him.
Yeah.
He wants senators who are going to line up and do what he says, are not going to be independent thinkers. And Kobach, love him or hate him, is going to go in for the Trump agenda. So you really do have a litmus test a little bit on, are you just going to, be the Republican Party of old? Are you going to be this sort of brash, new, sort of populist style Republican? And that's who Kobach is.
I mean, I can't stand Kris Kobach. I'm sure I also can't stand Roger Marshall, who's like the Chamber of Commerce guy. So for me, I don't have a dog in this fight. I would say Kobach's rhetoric and his positions on immigration, voter ID, and all these things to me are completely abhorrent. But the other thing that's interesting about it is last time around, Trump backed him in the primary, and that he narrowly squeaked by. This was in the governor's race back in 2018. This time, Trump has stayed down under pressure, it seems, from McConnell, from other Senate Republicans, from other sort of GOP allies. And you're absolutely right. McConnell has gone in really hard with his aides giving quotes on the record saying that if Kobach is the nominee, you can just hand the majority over to Chuck Schumer.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a real fear. Like, Kansas should not be in play. Right? In any normal era, Kansas should not be in play. But Kobach has already a demonstrated ability to lose a winnable race for Republicans.
Well, I will say the governor's race and the Senate race are a little bit different in Kansas.
Sure.
Kansas hasn't had a Republican governor, surprisingly, in a long time. And so it was a race that he was...
Well, they had Sam Brown back, who was extreme on the libertarian, kept cutting taxes to the point that the state was sort of falling apart. And you had such a Republican-dominated state that it was essentially like two Republican parties, the pro-Brownback extremist market fundamentalist party, and then the sort of more mainstream, mainline GOP party. So I think there was some scarring in the state, too, over that whole experience.
Yeah, and it is a different race this time around. And I think the dynamics nationally and statewide have changed. But I think, again, it goes back to this idea of, McConnell has anointed himself the head of the Senate and the ability to control every single person that comes there, who it will be. And his aides have gone after me on Twitter about this, saying, exactly what you said, the sort of fear-mongering about, well, we're going to lose everything if Kris Kobach is nominated. This parade of horribles is going to be trafficked out by a Democrat Senate. And I would just say, look, the Republican Senate has done that to itself. If the Republican Senate loses, if they lose in November, it is because they failed to produce a reason for voters to go to the polls. They have done nothing but confirm judges for the last 2 years. And judges are important, but they are not the silver bullet to a legislative strategy. And I think if you look at the Supreme Court, the couple of opinions, well, several opinions that have now come down, the conservative base has not been happy with them. And that is what they said would save us, right?
Right.
McConnell was like, we don't need to do anything. The judges will save you.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't. And so they have not made a theory of the case for Republican voters. And I think that Kris Kobach is important, but a distraction from that overall narrative.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I think your point is extremely important, which is the most important thing Mitch McConnell could do to try to secure his majority is actually address the economic fallout from the coronavirus right now. And, on that count, he's utterly failed. They missed the deadline. They've allowed unemployment benefits to lapse, as we've already been discussing here. The two sides don't appear to be even close to a deal at this point. They're saying it could take weeks more. McConnell is essentially at this point absent from the conversation. I mean, it's basically between Mnuchin, Meadows, and Schumer and Pelosi. Trump and McConnell are both kind of on the sidelines at this point. And so, the reason that the Senate majority is in such jeopardy for the Republicans, yes, Kris Kobach will be problematic for them and put Kansas as state into play that should not really in normal times be in play. But their problems are much bigger than that. States like Iowa, right, that are now on the table. North Carolina very much moving away from Republicans. Of course, Arizona, Maine, Colorado, these places that they already thought would be in jeopardy. So it's really that bigger picture, both from the Senate side and also the fact that President Trump is now so unpopular with his handling of COVID, with his handling of the protest movement. That has dragged down so many of these Republican candidates. And that goes way beyond the problems with Kris Kobach.
Yeah, you could salvage this, I think, nationwide if you had a Republican Senate that had a record to run on, separate and apart from, everything relating back to Trump, right?
Yeah.
You have a Senate that is full of, independent thinkers. Do something. Put something on the floor, put a wedge issue on the floor, give your voters some reason to know you're alive.
Yeah.
Because that's the issue right now.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you say about the courts, too, because having lived in Kentucky and seeing McConnell speak in his home state about his record, courts are all he talks about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really like the only thing. He'll bring up a couple of the corporate tax cut. Yay, great, amazing. Which is probably not that popular in the state of Kentucky.
Well, it's McConnell's base.
Right, that's it, right, exactly. It was base of donors, of nationwide donors, and the Chamber of Commerce. But the thing that he always brings up are the Supreme Court nominees in particular and the judges overall. So talk a little bit, because Tucker talked about this as well, but I think the perspective is so interesting. Look, some of these decisions, I think on the corporate stuff, the Supreme Court has been absolutely terrible, and the mainstream media ignores those decisions and focuses only on the sort of, the things that I think are important, anti-discrimination and equality issues. But those are the pieces where conservatives have been really disappointed with the court. How much does that matter in terms of President Trump's reelection, in terms of holding on to the Senate? Because my recollection from 2016 is there was this real open question over whether evangelicals were going to back President Trump. And when he came out with the list of Supreme Court nominees and they looked at that and was like, all right, well, we got to go here for the courts. Is some of that faith sort of shaken because of some of the decisions that came down?
Yeah, the Supreme Court was a huge base motivator in 2016, and we know this from the exit polling. We know it from looking back. But I do think that has been fractured. I think there's now sort of an existential weariness, a lack of trust in the base from politicians who literally said, and if they had said, look, we're going to confirm judges. This is a big part of what we do, but we are also going to legislatively fight on your behalf on these key issues.
Yeah.
Right? It would be a totally different issue that we're talking about right now. But it wasn't that. They sort of sent the entire legislative agenda to the judiciary, and they said, hands off, like we don't actually have to do anything. These guys are going to get it done for you. This is what's going to cement everything that you want. And we just haven't seen that. And I think on some key issues, it's interesting you point out the sort of administrative state. Republicans' internal conversations talk about that. They say, look, we always get really good judges on the administrative state, on the regulatory side, on financial law,
on
all
stuff
these
that
things.
Like the chamber wants and the business interests want.
Right, but on these sort of cultural issues, which shouldn't be decided by the courts anyway, right? These are unelected, they have a very important role, but the cultural issues and the sort of popular base issues, you want your representative government to fight over. That is what we send them there to do, because they're accountable. You can elect them out if you don't like the decision that they make. But there was this deference of all of that responsibility to the courts, and I do think the base has noticed. And so judges, again, not unimportant, but they are not a replacement for a legislative strategy. And unfortunately, that's something the Senate never learned.
Yeah, well, really be interesting to see the dynamics tonight if Kobach can get through the primary without Trump's endorsement, what that means for November. And we'll certainly be watching it here, and we'll have more Rising for you after this.